Um, 20 years ago, where I sat down in Texas next to a person wearing this T-shirt. I'm assuming this sort of knows really what this is. That's okay. I did. This very specific meme. If you're exactly as online as I was, exactly as old as I was, yeah, you could form a human connection via something strategically bizarre. I've been friends with this person for 20 years now. Just meditate on that as like the power content tissue. So I'm Joe. I'm the CEO of it. I'm actually not good at Facet. More philosophical and high concepts than that. So you'll have seen this slide, if not today, multiple today. You've probably seen it at some point in your careers. Everything you can imagine is real. I used to use this in talks early in my career because it's very inspirational. Pablo Picasso, et cetera, et cetera. Nowadays, I use the slide more in a cautionary tone because literally everything you can imagine is now real. We've seen incredible technology today that a couple of keystrokes can create images, create video, create experiences out of effectively nothing. And you're really limited by your ability to, what you want to make. So what I actually want to talk about today is the how question. How do we design for a world that is increasingly, post-scarcity in terms of visual content? There's more images. There are more photographs being taken than ever before. The imagery is actually looking to photography, just a total content. There's so much. There's first words to her were, "Oh, what an implement of torture have I acquired in you." Her father, of course, being Lord Byron, so that's not surprising. So Ada Lovelace argues kind of the opposite. This is like not even 100 years later, right? So the machine that she's programming, the Babbage's analytical engine, it can only do whatever we know how to order it to perform. So it's very much constrained by the rules of the system. So we've been talking about this idea of mechanical creativity, of machines being creative for hundreds of years. So there's a bunch of questions here that I think are worth noting. Is it art? Is it really creative in any way? I don't care at all, honestly, about these first two. These are incredibly interesting questions, but they are far above my pay grade as a creative tools maker. The only one here that I really care about is it actually useful to human creatives? Cool. So I'm going to spend most of the talk talking about this thing. Y'all have seen this. This is the bell curve. Before we get to that, raise your hand if you've seen Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. All right, I got 2, 3, 4. Excellent. I love y'all. That's okay. So this is a fantastic movie, but you don't have to have seen it to understand the point that I'm about to make. So Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? This was Mike Nichols' directorial debut. He did The Graduate, for example. The movie won 5 Academy Awards. It was actually nominated in every eligible category. I think it was the second film ever to be nominated in every eligible category. starring Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, of course. It was considered at the time to be so vulgar that it actually sparked the creation of the MPAA, which does the R rating, PG-13 rating, that sort of stuff. What you might not know is that it was based on a play, a wildly popular play at the time by Edward Albee. And Edward Albee talks about where he got the title for the play from, which became the title of the movie. I was there at a saloon in New York having a beer, and I saw "Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf" scrawled in soap, I suppose, on this mirror. When I started to write the play, it cropped up in my mind again, and of course, "Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf" means who's afraid of the big bad wolf, who's afraid of living life without false illusions. That was the reference to Virginia Woolf. And it did strike me as kind of being a rather typical university intellectual joke. So here's a direct connection from a random bit of graffiti in, a bathroom in the West Village, creating this just cascade of events that led to, one of the best movies at all time, and I highly recommend y'all see it. But so what's going on here is this spark of creativity. Where did this idea come from? So when I think of the bell curve, I kind of think of "Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf," and I think of it kind of being this almost outlier level. This is a brilliant turn of phrase. We actually don't know who said it or why, where it came from, but it really captures kind of a moment in time. So where do these great sparks of creativity, where does it actually happen? Another example, maybe more obvious to folks, so the Nike slogan, "Just Do It." Y'all know the story behind this, right? So, of course, it was created by these two gentlemen, Wieden and Kennedy, one of the kind of premier advertising agencies based in Portland. The slogan actually it was inspired by the last words of a convicted murderer who was executed in the late 70s. So it's a very edgy, every time I see this phrase, I'm reminded of this fact. And this is very edgy. It's a great slogan, easily top 10, top 5 marketing slogans ever created. But it was, it was a murderer's, last words, right? So I kind of thought, wouldn't it be fun to see if we could take, today's sort of AI and try to come up with similar, could we do copy, could we do copywriting at this level or even remotely close to this level, right? So I actually spent probably an hour and a half, 2 hours with ChatGPT on this specific problem, and it came up with some phrases. It came up with "leap ahead." It came up with "stride with grit." It came up with "step beyond limits." And these are kind of the best that I could get it to coax it into doing. I actually explained to it, I had it explain to me why "Just Do It" was a good slogan. I had it explain to me why, could you take that reasoning from that slogan and apply it to other slogans? And so it's actually pretty good at this introspection, right? So "step beyond limits" is good as a slogan for a shoe company because of double meaning, empowerment, memorability and brevity, versatility, positive connotation. All these things are true, right? And necessary in marketing. The problem is it just doesn't pop, right? This is a good slogan. This is not a great slogan. And the fact of the matter is, honestly, the trick kind of only works once. Wieden and Kennedy were able to pull this off once at a certain moment in time. It was great, but you can't go and keep using that trick over and over again. And as creatives, we tend to know this, right? So what's going on here? So getting back to this guy. So Ted Chiang, who wrote Arrival and a bunch of other incredible sci-fi, has a wonderful piece in the New Yorker last year called ChatGPT is a, quote, a blurry JPEG of the web. And I like this metaphor a lot because I think this really captures part of what's going on here, right? So you can think of these very deep models as somehow just snapshots of a lot of information. And really what they're doing is they're trying to hold all of that in, but they can't, they can't memorize all of it. They have to forget some stuff. And the way that you do it is by kind of forgetting very optimally. And you start to average things. And so in particular, you start to fill in the gaps. That's where hallucinations, quote, hallucinations come from. But another thing you start to do as well is you start to actually focus in on what is the average of experience. So unless otherwise directed, pretty much all Gen AI systems, and this applies to text, this applies to images, this applies to video, they have a very strong tendency to average. So to give you back more or less, if I took all of style, if I took all of art, I'm going to give you back kind of the prototypical thing. And this is a good gimmick in a lot of ways. But when we're trying to be actually creative, when we're trying to actually develop something new, this can be a hindrance. So you are here. This is what basically all Gen AI systems today are doing. They're incredibly useful and powerful. We build them at Facet, we use them all the time. But I think it's really important to understand that this is the case, that these things are just incredibly homogenizing forces. They're not trying to be novel. They're not trying to turn heads. They're not trying to to invent the future. They're just kind of trying to memorize everything that they've already seen. Okay, so we've pointed out the problem. Now, what do we do if we want something that actually pops, right? That, your creative director came in and said, I like this design direction, but it doesn't pop. We've all been there, right? What do we do? So I think the way to think about this is to kind of change the question, right? So we want to go from this question today in large language models, can an AI answer questions accurately? This is obviously a great goal of AI, but it's not that useful for creatives, right? What we actually need as creatives is, can AI tell a good story? And this is really what's missing today. This is the thing that I think the fundamental critical fact of the world that deep models just don't really have a good firm grasp on yet. I say yet because who knows how this is going to change or play out. But at least for now, it's worth understanding this. So I'll give a couple of folks who have thought about this. So first off, Italo Calvino, 6 Memos for the Next Millennium. He's writing in, I think, the late 1980s. We may distinguish between two types of imaginative process, one that starts with the word and arrives at a visual image, prompting, and one that starts with a visual image and arrives at its verbal expression. This is, captioning, right? We actually have machine learning systems that do both of these today. In devising a story, the first thing that comes to mind, and to my mind, is an image that, for some reason, strikes me as charged with meaning, even if I cannot formulate this meaning in discursive or conceptual terms. I think this is really interesting. So there's some spark. He's talking about this spark of, this is what I want to convey to people. I don't know what the right words for it, but I can see it in my head. We've all been there. The cognitive scientists think about this in terms of conceptual spaces. So Margaret Bowden, a world famous cognitive scientist at Sussex, in the late 80s to early 90s, kind of defines this idea of conceptual space. It's the generative system that underlies the domain of a certain range of possibilities, chess moves, molecular structures, or jazz melodies. The thing about conceptual spaces, most AI models of creativity can only explore these spaces. They can go in, they can recombine elements, they can kind of explore and move along predefined paths, but they cannot transform them. They cannot actually create something truly novel that doesn't already exist somewhere in the training data itself. Very chimerical almost, right? The head of a horse, the body of a chicken, things like that. This is very similar to what I would call the last wave of creative tools. So John Maeda has this rant about Photoshop, talking about the styles that emerge from the Photoshop era are so homogeneous because the software is so universal. We're all using the same tools, so we're all getting the same results, so everything looks the same. This same fact, fast forward to today, still incredibly relevant. In fact, more so, right? Because you're not just it's no longer an editing tool that you're interacting with. It's a tool that actually starts from nothing and brings you almost all the way to the the final content that you want to produce. So as creatives, we need to be careful of this fact that these tools are they're pulling all of us back to the average. To my mind, what's missing is really simple. There's three things: narrative, intentionality, and taste. And all three of these, time and time again, we haven't seen tools that are able to substitute for any one of these three things. These are, without a doubt, the most important part of any creative act. And there's nothing in generative AI today that can substitute any of this. This all has to come from you. You are a forward-looking creativity engine, and Gen AI is just a tool that you're using to tell whatever story it is that you want to tell. I'll stop there. I think one last thing that I want to note in this is it's been a wild ride in creative tools in the last year and a half, but it's still very, very early. These things are in flux. 2 years ago, they were barely usable. Today, they're everywhere. Tomorrow, who knows? I mean, this is still a technology that's very much on the upswing. Some people are starting to get jaded by it, but it's showing no sign of stopping. There's just amazing new stuff coming out day after day after day. It's important to understand that. So, push ideas, not pixels. That's the message that I have for you. Thank you so much. Try Facet.